Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Good afternoon. My name is David Witherington Stewart. I'm 85 years old, a Florida author, and I have written 5 novels, and I'm going to talk today about a novel that's in work, a work in progress. But I want you to understand why I'm writing this novel and how I'm going about the process, because I think it's interesting to know not only about a written work, one that's published, but what's going on with one that isn't published. This book is literary fiction. It'll be about 80,000 words long, and it involves a 15-year-old girl who runs away from home and finds a career in the music business. I'm going to show a PowerPoint slide, and I will talk to the slide. Okay, this is the story. Once upon a time, 1972 to be exact, there was a 12-year-old girl who lived in a small town in Florida, which is, we live in Titusville, Florida, and this is a town very similar. She looked older than 12 and had an independent spirit. You know, you could be 12 years old and look 20. And this girl is one of those who is going through puberty early and who looks more mature than she is, and who actually can pass for 18 or so. Next slide, please. This girl is very smart, but she's not interested in what's going on in school. And she basically walks out of school on occasion. And she doesn't want to be kept at home. She doesn't want to come in on time for bedtime or anything like that. So she's very difficult for her parents and the school system to travel to handle. Next slide, please. So she runs away from school and her home. And hello, Bob. And she does this many times. She goes to Daytona Beach. She goes to Columbus, Ohio. She goes out to California. She just hitchhikes around and goes wherever she wants to go. And they catch up with her and they bring her home and they put her in detention homes and foster homes and what have you. Next slide, please. Eventually, they flush her out and they try and keep her in detention centers, but most of those are not high security. She can walk away from them. They put her in foster homes, and as long as she shows up when the caseworker comes around, she doesn't really have to obey rules in the foster home either. So she pretty much does what she wants to do, but she goes to a variety of places that are meant to keep children off the streets and out of trouble. Next slide, please. But eventually she does something that gets her in real trouble, and that is she steals a car. Well, hi, Julie. Good afternoon. And she wrecks the car, and of course, she's not liable. The parents aren't liable, but the judge wants to hear about the stealing, the crime she's broken, and so on like that. So she goes into the courts. Next slide, please. Well, when she goes into court, the judge really brings the gavel down. And basically, what happens is she gets called into the judge's office with her parents, and he tells her, you can keep on going the way you are, and eventually you'll be an adult criminal, and I can put you in the regular jail, or I can just let you go, and or I can put you in jail right now. I could put you in an adult jail, but that would just make you a better criminal. So I'm going to give you a choice. You can go to a place where they will really help you, where they have good counseling, and you won't run away from this place. You won't get out of there. So next slide, please. So he sends her to a detention center that she can't escape from, but it has good counseling. Oh, thank you. Glad to catch you too. And he sends her to this detention center. It's named Lancaster up in Trenton, Florida. And she finds out that a lot of kids are in a whole lot more trouble than she is. So the group therapy sessions are very, very helpful to the girl. She begins to realize that a lot of people have bigger troubles than she does, and a lot of what she's doing is she can't escape from it, and she has to face herself and face reality. And she's there for 13 months. And the first 6 weeks, she is actually held in solitary because they want to basically do some psychoanalysis and so on like that on her as an independent person. And then she's given tasks within the compound. And one of those tasks is that she can play piano for everybody at lunch. So she becomes very, very good at her music. And by the time she's let out, she has a totally different attitude. And one of the things I will tell you is she sits down with her father and she says, Dad, there's kids in here that their parents don't live but 2 or 3 blocks away. They live within walking distance, and they have never been here to visit their kids. And you and Mom drive 400 miles on the weekends to come up and see me, and I really appreciate it. So that's really a big breakthrough with her. Next slide, please. So she gets let out of this detention center, and she comes back to her hometown, but she doesn't want to go to school. And she goes to live with a boyfriend. And the boyfriend's parents allow her to live with them. So nobody really objects, and clearly they're acting like they're keeping house, but they're not really old enough to do that. And what happens? The next slide, please. Inevitably, she gets pregnant. And when she gets pregnant, she asks everybody, "What should I do about it?" And they tell her, "Well, it's your decision." And she gets counseling, and she leaves the boyfriend. She really doesn't want to marry him. I mean, he's too young too. They're both only 15 years old. And she comes back home, and after the abortion. So next slide, please. But things don't work out well at home either. She's very independent now. She wants to do everything her own way, and eventually gets into a big fight between her father, her mother, and herself. And there's a fight, and the police have to be called. So the police come and they break it up, and they more or less put her off with someone else for the moment. But next slide, please. But what happens eventually is they get crisis counseling. Now, crisis counseling is much different than regular counseling. It's where the crisis counselor really sits down with everyone involved and asks them what they want to do, what they think they can do, and eventually they work out a schedule and a plan that everyone can live to. What time to come home, how to behave, what you're going to do, how to talk to one another. It's a whole list of things that are put up on the refrigerator, and people live by those rules. Everyone agrees to them, and everyone lives by those rules. So crisis counseling is very effective. Next slide, please. And as a result of the crisis counseling, the girl earns her graduation equivalent diploma, graduates high school, goes to work in a local bank as a teller, and then gets promoted, buys her own car, rents a place of her own, a trailer, and she gets engaged to a very, very upstanding young man who works for his father in a construction business. And she basically goes, uh, becomes very straight, becomes very independent. She's on her own, and she's 19 years old and really doing very well. And everyone is very satisfied with her life. Next slide, please. And then on June 30th, 1979, when she goes to the square in Orlando to shop, she gets abducted and a serial killer kills her. He slits her throat. Next slide, please. Well, that girl was my daughter. And it did happen in 1979. They caught the person who killed her. They put him in jail, and he eventually hanged himself in jail in 1992. Next slide, please. So I learned a lot from the things that she went through and what happened with Edie. Number one is a delinquent is basically trying to follow their own natural inclination, but society and her parents and the school system and everything stops it. So they're very frustrated. And she's not, the delinquent is not really a criminal. It's not really a bad person. It's just that they don't want to obey the regular societal rules because they don't fit with their idea of how their life ought to be lived. So they adopt a very semi-social kind of mode of behavior. They're called delinquents. They're rebels. They end up in a lot of institutions, a lot of different situations. And eventually they have to find a situation in which they can satisfy their normal human desires and their normal human functions, and not necessarily those that society would like to impose upon them. So it's a long process. And after Edie was killed, I worked a lot with delinquent kids and foster kids. And I think because of my experience with her, I was able to accomplish quite a few good things with many of them. And some of them kept their babies, they went back to school. There were a lot of different situations. And of course, it wasn't confined to black kids or white kids or anything like that. It can happen to any kid in any social environment, rich kids, poor kids, smart kids, not so smart kids. It can happen to anyone. It's a normal thing that can happen. Next slide, please. So I wanted to take that experience and write a story. And I couldn't write Edie's story per se because there were a lot of things I didn't know about her story. A lot of that time from 12 to 15 when she was gone, I only got what was happening to her on bits and pieces when she showed up occasionally. So I'm writing a story about a girl named Julie who lives in whose home is Homerville, Georgia, which is right on the edge of the Okefenokee Swamp. So Julie is very dissatisfied with the town, with the school, with her parents. She doesn't feel like they're paying enough attention to her. So she runs away from Homertown with her best friend forever, Rosie, who is also a little bit dissatisfied with school and also matured early. And Julie and Rosie both have a musical talent. Julie plays piano and synthesizer, and Rosie has a great voice. And Julie also plays guitar. So they go down to Daytona Beach and they get discovered by this guy who works for a mob boss, Angelo, up in Atlanta. And Angelo likes Julie because she reminds him of a daughter that he lost. His daughter was killed. And he basically takes on Julie and Rosie and he sponsors them to try and pursue a music career. And they end up out in Kansas City, Missouri, and then eventually down in San Diego, California. And they do have a modest musical career. But of course, what they find is that they can't be great. They're not going to be outstanding. They're not going to be famous or anything like that. They're just going to be good musicians. And they do cut an album. So, but they have many adventures together in between. And eventually they end up reconciling with their parents and going back to Homerville to get married to boys that they met while they were out on their adventure. So I tried to make it a good story with a happy ending and not make it a sad story with a sad ending like Edie's story was. So I'm done with the PowerPoint. Thank you. So when you're writing a story like that, you really have to get very, very empathetic. Oh, thank you, Kelly. I'm glad this helped you. Writing a story like that, you really have to get intimate with the characters and get to know them. No, this is not Psychic Redemption. This is a book, Ben, that I'm writing right now that actually isn't published yet. It goes to the developmental editor in June, and then when it comes back to me after rewrite, I figure we'll probably publish it in September. So it's a book that I'm writing right now. And that's what the WIP means. It means work in progress. But I just thought I'd share what it's like to write a book like this. How did I deal with such heavy topics? Um, well, I try and make the circumstances a little bit lighthearted and something that basically people can understand. You have to make it believable. And of course, the musical talent that these two girls have at 15 is a little bit unusual. It's outstanding. And the people that they meet, some of them are not so nice, some of them are very nice. So I think you just have to put yourself in their place. What would they do when they got there? How would they react? They're small town girls, both of them. So when they get into a place like Kansas City, it's a pretty much a big town to them. And they have a lot to learn about living in the city as compared to living in a rural area of Georgia. So that's the thing is that you have to get with the characters, and the characters will grow, and the characters will do what they want to do, and then you have to talk to people who have 15-year-old girls, and then you have to talk to 15-year-old girls. You have to get out and meet people and know people who are in similar circumstances or who have had similar experiences. The other thing is getting to know the places they go. I'm surprised when I got to, I don't know why I picked Kansas City exactly, but I knew Charlie Parker had been there, and I knew it had some good musical background. But I was amazed when I got to Kansas City how many things it had in its history that were of interest to the musical industry. So it really isn't just a cow town; it's a whole lot more than that. And of course, I knew San Diego. I actually lived out in Nashville City near San Diego for a while, so I know a little bit about it. But each place you go to, you have to do a lot of research. You get to understand the location and the weather conditions, the living conditions, the kind of people that live there, the kinds of things that they do in that town. So a lot of it is picking the circumstances and then learning about the circumstances. And that may change as I do rewrites because any book, uh, the first draft is only a first draft, and you're going to do a lot of rewrites before that first draft really becomes something that you want to put out to the public. And in those rewrites, you're going to get to know the characters better, the locations better, and the plot better. But it just takes a while. And you think you have the theme when you start, but sometimes the theme changes too. You know, my theme is that errant kittens make sober cats, and I may indeed change the title of the novel to be Errant Kittens. But what does that mean? Well, it's not. It has to be more than just a coming of age kind of story. I think it has to be deeper than that because the theme has to resonate not just in one circumstance of one generation, but with people in later generations. How is the book going to last 100 years from now? Is the circumstance going to be the same? It sounds like a lot of real life stories. Well, it is. Um, and they're not all sad by any means. I've seen some very, very good outcomes. I've seen some of these kids really catch hold and grow up and be very, very independent and productive people. So not every story ends sad by any means. A lot of stories end up very, very positive. As a matter of fact, the fact that many of these kids are very independent and very smart and very willing to to take life as it comes at them makes them, I think, more likely to succeed over the long run. So I don't consider it all to be sad at all. I consider a lot of it to be very hopeful. But what I will add is we don't have enough institutions with good counseling and good retention to help. We keep building prisons and putting people in prisons and then kind of mistreating them. That's not the answer. The answer is to catch it early and help a lot of these people before they get to the point where they have to be put in prison, and to put them into some kind of a situation where they basically can understand themselves and understand society and reconcile the differences they have. So we don't have enough of that kind of thinking. We have too much of thinking strictly of punishment and not enough of correction. So I would love to see a lot more expenditures for institutions that really helped. Yeah, there are people. Well, there are people who never found their way in a lot of cases, or whose way is so different from what society wants to put on them that they have to search for a different way. And a lot of them are very artistic. They don't fit the normal mold of being either intellectually desiring to go to college or being just wanting to get married and raise kids or things like that. A lot of times they want art careers, music careers. Uh, they want to do their own thing. And society doesn't always provide a path for them to do it easily. A lot of times they have to work a little harder at getting that. So a lot of the true stories, they kind of start out sad, and it's particularly sad that quite often kids have so many disagreements with their parents, or their parents don't really know how to help them, and they don't go get help beyond what they're trying to provide. And also, a lot of it's so misguided because they try and force them into a path that might be good for them, but might not be good for that kid, might not be good for that individual. So you have to be very open to the characteristics of the individual, and not just what you would like for them to be, but what do they really want to be, and where can they find that path. I don't know. All of this has to be woven into the story, and I'm still writing it. So a lot of times I'll run into a situation where Julie or Rosie is basically facing some kind of dilemma, and I basically have to sit down and talk to them. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle this? And particularly in the case when one of them gets pregnant, and she does not get an abortion. She decides to keep the child and go back and tell her parents and see what she can work out. So there's all kinds of different solutions to things depending upon the individual and what they believe and what they want to do, and the kind of counseling they get, of course. So it's a very complicated subject. I certainly won't cover all aspects of it. All I can do is tell a story. Yeah, it has the seeds. You're right about the seeds, and any novel, it always starts out with those seeds, uh, with that concept, with that precept, with the proposition. But as it grows, it becomes much more than that, of course, and eventually it becomes a tale of a character, a believable tale of a character, something that you can sink into it, and you can live with that character, and you can experience it, and you can empathize with them. And when they're sad, you feel sad. When they're happy, you feel happy. And when they win, you win. And when they lose, you lose. You have to be so in touch with the character that it actually is like you were living it yourself. And that's something that takes a while to achieve sometimes. It takes a lot of talking to them, trying to live in their shoes, looking at their situation, and trying to understand the alternatives and making it real so that the reader is going to say, yeah, that makes sense. That's what could happen. So anyway, that's the story I'm writing right now. I'm working on it. I never know how long a novel is going to take. I'm going to meet the deadline for the editor in June. But once it comes back from the developmental editor, you really don't know what's going to happen because developmental editors can really tear your piece apart. They can really help you a great deal, but they can really find a lot of the flaws in what you've written, and you need to take their advice and go back and do the rewrite the way that they laid it out. Uh, so at any rate, that's about all I have to say about that piece right now. Well, yeah, and world building. There's all kinds of world building. I've done fantasy and I've done science fiction and I've done thrillers. And each time the world building process is a little bit different. Yeah, well, outside the festival, anybody can get in touch with me. I've been getting a lot of messages. I haven't been able to sit down and answer a lot of them yet because I have to allocate my time. But I'm perfectly willing to correspond with anybody. And the best way to do it with me is either over Facebook or text or blog. Any one of those ways will work pretty well. I don't know anything about Instagram. I don't use it, but I probably need to learn to use it. I don't use Twitter, but I do use Facebook, and I do answer texts. So that's two ways you can get in touch with me. I'm enjoying the festival, John. Yes, I am. And with Sunday, I'm going to be in the author of the hour at 5 o'clock, and this is my last booth broadcast. So the festival just about wrapped up for me, and I've enjoyed it. I love this virtual venue because it's I don't really travel much at 85 anymore. I traveled extensively when I was younger. I've been all over the world. I've been on every continent, and I've been in a lot of other places. I've been in a lot of places for an extended period of time in Peru and India and places like that. But this is my last booth session. You can go to my website, or you can go to like I say, you can text me. You can make a post on my blog. I'd love to see posts on the blog about the things that are going on, and don't hesitate to change the subject. I'm interested in any subject you want to talk about. Okay, I think I see repeats on the questions now, so I think I'm about ready to wrap this up. Are there any other comments before I sign off? Have I considered writing a book about how to write well? Um, I have considered it. I'll tell you, I have given a lot of courses. I have done a lot of mentoring sections where I've had 5 or 6 students, and I have them write. And out of those, by the way, I think 5 of them have actually published their books. So it's been a one-on-one kind of a thing. I haven't really thought about writing a book about it, but I guess I could. Um, I did write a memoir, Seeking Success, and I have written some essays on how to write, but I've never thought about putting it into a book. But I could do that. I could do that. I'll think about doing that. That's a good suggestion. I always feel like I'm not really quite qualified to do that. I don't have any I don't have any certifications other than just how to write novels from Humber and from the Writer's Digest School. So I haven't sold a million books or anything like that, so I don't know. But I might think about doing that. It's a good suggestion. Are there any other comments or questions? All right, I think we're done. Amy, I think we can go ahead and sign off now.